Nora Gedgaudas is a board-certified nutritional consultant and neurofeedback specialist with a private practice in Portland, Oregon. She's widely recognised as an authority on the Paleo diet, having penned the best-selling book Primal Body, Primal Mind, and most recently Primal Fat Burner. She also wrote the best-selling e-book Rethinking Fatigue. She's a well-known speaker and educator, and she's appeared on national and international radio and also podcasts, online summits, TV and film. It was a great pleasure to get the opportunity to interview her once again recently, because I wanted to get her take on this whole global pandemic situation in the context of her knowledge of the ketogenic diet and metabolic flexibility. I began by asking her what was her initial take on this alleged pandemic.
To me, it was such an obvious ruse, the way it was being handled. But I realized that, I need to look into this because I want to be responsible in my, responses to people. If there is something worthy of concern, I don't want to dismiss that. I want to go in. And so my attitude about this was, I'm going to be objective, and take a deep breath, try to suspend disbelief long enough to go in and objectively evaluate the data, and go wherever it leads me.
Yeah.
And, to date now, I've put easily over 300 hours into this thing. I mean, 10 to 12 hours a day, or sometimes 15 hours a day, I am in this very space researching like mad.
Yeah.
And my criteria is that whatever I draw upon in terms of conclusions or ideas about this has to be from credible scientific or investigative journalistic sources, scientific sources, medical sources that are verifiable, where there is a paper trail that I can follow, so to speak. Paper trail, it's very little paper anymore. And although we would all do well to start printing things out, because a lot of the paper is going away. We have mass censorship now. Yeah. And really, why would you have to censor anything? I mean, why can't, for something with this much at stake, that's this important, where so little about this was understood from the get-go.
Yeah.
Why isn't there room for everyone who's qualified to do so, to chime in and share perspectives and science and whatever to try to arrive at a more meaningful consensus? But that was never allowed. From the very beginning, there was a mainstream orthodoxy that stepped in and said, nope, we know, and everybody else is a conspiracy theorist, and anybody who challenges this, effectively has been censored, stymied, their websites wiped off of the mainstream search engines, and Facebook posts, or whole Facebook accounts completely deleted, Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts, all kinds of things.
And this is again, it's more contextual information, isn't it, that we need to bring to bear, because all of the things you've listed there are extremely poignant. They all help build a picture that needs to be appreciated as we approach the whole issue. And I mean, so you approached the whole issue with a healthy degree of skepticism. Let's see what's going on. Let's examine the facts.
Right.
And I share that approach. Yep.
Well, and there are a couple of things worth commenting on right out of the gate, because one of the reasons that I did not rely upon a lot of mainstream information to form my opinions is that for quite some time now, those of us that have been diving into this, and I talked about it. I did a talk back in 2018 at Montana State University. I can't recall whether I brought this up before, but you'll like the title. It was called Navigating the Matrix, right?
Yeah,
and I urge you to supply the link to that. I mean, I can send you the link. And it was the riskiest talk I ever gave, but it was also in many ways the most important, because at that time I could see the drumbeat of where things were going, at least within the realm of diet and health, right? And I was speaking to an academic audience that was, up in arms about. We have supplied so much evidence. We've done so much to debunk the mainstream nutritional narrative and all of that kind of thing, that government guidelines, which clearly, we have all sorts of evidence to show it just doesn't work. It makes things worse, not better. Why, with all the evidence we're supplying, all of the hard, credible evidence that we're supplying, has this never been taken into account? And the premise of my talk was, you have to understand the nature of the system. You have to understand the nature of, of what it is, that we're up against here, in order to comprehend why we haven't been taken seriously. And we have to understand this if we are going to learn to navigate around it, which is why it was called Navigating, the Matrix, because, unless we see where the obstacles are, we can't navigate around them. We're just stumbling around in the dark and wondering why, we can't find anything, why we can't, get to where we want to go. Yeah. And very interestingly, a lot of what I talked about there is kind of come into play with respect to this whole, let's call it, the big pandemic scare. And but there are two things that we need to understand right out of the gate, is that the mainstream media has been compromised all the way since 1947 or 48, when the United States government basically created, rather unconstitutionally, I might add, a new agency called the CIA, and appointed as its first head of the CIA, Allen Dulles, who was an attorney for Rockefeller, and is arguably one of the most sketchy characters that has ever lived. And one of the first things that he did with his tenure of the CIA was he instituted something called Operation Mockingbird. And this isn't conspiracy theory. This is really well established. The problem is, of course, that most people have never heard of it, and people need to understand what that is. What he did was he injected, totally illegally and unconstitutionally, 400 CIA operatives into all aspects of the mainstream media of the time, and many of the most of the media figures of the day, and like the Walter Cronkites and the. Oh gosh, I can see this guy's face and I can't remember his name right now. But there were a lot of the biggest names of the time were actually CIA operatives who were injected into the media in order to control the social narrative, in order to control what was being talked about and what wasn't. And this was mainly in an effort to provide a platform for the military-industrial complex, right, for the Pentagon, basically, at the time. Mm-hmm. And back in 1976, I believe it was, the Church Committee exposed this operation. And by that time, there were more than 3,000 CIA operatives injected throughout the entire mainstream media, not just the televised news, but radio, print, magazines, everything. And it was exposed, brought to the light of day. There were hearings. And at the time, the then head of the CIA, Dulles, was long gone. And I forget this guy's name off the top of my head. But the guy who was heading the CIA at the time took the fall as like being the bad guy, and was thrown out. And who they put in this place was George Bush Sr., who said, yeah, we don't do that anymore. No, we don't do that anymore. And it's all good now. Well, why the hell wouldn't they? And why should we believe them when it's really their job to lie? That's what the CIA does in part. They're extremely, extremely well schooled at that. So, I'm sure that the name changed, but those kinds of operations, there's no reason to think that they ever would have given up that platform of almost total power within the media to control things. But it was mostly, I think, in the interest of the military-industrial complex at the time. And this is why things like, the Vietnam War were allowed to happen. The Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened. The whole thing, that the entire Vietnam War, 55,000 American lives lost, probably up as many as 4 million Vietnamese lives lost, predicated on a lie.
Yeah.
And of course we since, know that things like the Iraq War were predicated on a lie. The weapons of mass destruction never materialized, but they were so sure that now we have a quagmire orders of magnitude worse than Vietnam, predicated on a lie. But back in 2013, our then president, one that many people thought were a better alternative to his predecessor, and turns out he was actually much worse, much to the chagrin of many of us who hoped he'd be better. Barack Obama signed into law an amended version of the National Defense Authorization Act. And in that, there was something called the Modernized Smith-Mundt Act, which effectively made, quote unquote, legal, still constitutionally illegal, which really is the law of the land. I mean, it could be overridden by a constitutional, it should be overridden by the Supreme Court. But that law allowed for the legal propagandizing of the American public using all aspects of the mainstream and online media, all right, without Americans' knowledge or consent.
Yep.
And, once that went into effect, all bets are off. You're kind of foolish to just automatically accept whatever you see in the media for face value at that point, because if they know they can propagandize you for whatever purposes they deem necessary or, in their best interest and the best interest of not just the government, but we have to realize our governments are more or less owned by corporate and other financially vested interests.
Absolutely.
So we have to be cautious at the very least. And that's not to say that everything that's published, everything that's televised is wrong. No. Even a hardcore pathological liar knows that in order to be successful as a pathological liar, you've got to have at least 10% truth in there. Of course, we're left to wonder which 10% we're actually, dealing with at any given moment. And so it's kind of incumbent upon us as responsible citizens, because here in the United States, people forget we are our government. We are, it's a government by, of, and for the people. Yeah. And it's up to us to keep our elected officials in check. They work for us, not the other way around. But people are now operating, because civics classes and things like that haven't happened in a long time. Most Americans are under this sort of vague impression that the government makes the rules and we're supposed to follow them. And in fact, the opposite is true. The entire constitution of our republic and our democracy is predicated on the idea that our government is there for the sole purpose of preserving our rights and freedoms as individuals. Yeah. And that's all they're supposed to be doing. But obviously, things have changed. So based upon that, I knew I was going to have to go to independent sources of science and journalism, but they had to be credible. They had to, and again, every time I came across something, I never took anything for face value. I went and I did a deep dive into paper trails and into, if I found a scientific study, I went to the references in the study and I followed those. Sometimes it was comical, and if if some kind of independent investigative journalist, presented information and provided references, and the only ones I was willing to listen to were the ones willing to provide me with references that I could follow, and I followed all those things. I just exhausted myself, really. I mean, I've lost so much sleep over this. And so everything that I'm presenting, right now, and all of the information that I am providing on this particular topic of, current events, we'll say, is all predicated on that work. And it's not, I'm not just spewing opinions. There's too much at stake here, for crying out loud.
Absolutely.
So, the first, things that I started writing, and I have hundreds of pages of things I've written, I realized were far too overwhelming for people to take in. For starters, people were already, almost paralyzed by fear. And I realized that anything that added to that was really not going to be helpful. If people are paralyzed with fear, one of the things I talked about in Primal Body, Primal Mind, I'm really proud of those those chapters that talked about this, because it really speaks to what's happening on a sociological level now, but also from a biological perspective. I spent more than 20 years working with the brain in a clinical capacity. And what I can tell you is that when the brain is in a state of sympathetic overarousal, in other words, fight or flight, we're overwhelmed by anxiety, and we're overwhelmed by fear. The part of our brain that makes us the most human, the prefrontal cortex, our executive function, that allows us to take in information, process it in a rational way, and then respond to information instead of just react, right? That allows us to evaluate the steps we need to take toward the future in reference to the past, and be able to think clearly. That part of our brain goes away. The blood flow to that part of the brain completely goes away, and instead shunted toward right here, right now, knee-jerk reactivity, fight or flight, literally, agitation, aggression, and or just simply a fear-based reactivity as opposed to rational response. And it's a hallmark of everything that we're in the midst of right now. And I've got to tell you that, I think there's much more to be concerned about in terms of what is promulgating these fears by the mainstream media than there is any viral spook out of China.
Absolutely.
I managed to get my hands on the first two studies, that came out of this whole pandemic and everything else. And what was shocking in reviewing those scientific papers was the fact that the scientists that initially identified this novel virus never went about the gold standard of isolating, purifying, and testing that for its pathogenicity. Something called the Koch's postulates were never met. And they freely and openly admitted that in the first two papers. All they've ever really gotten is a partial, sort of genetic sequence from some fluid from the lungs of somebody who appeared to be, suffering from some novel, respiratory condition. And it's those nucleic acid sequences that were used then to institute all the testing. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I realized that what I needed to do with my audience that was relying on me for, like, what the hell do we do? What's going on? Oh my God, are we all going to die? What's happening? Was that I wanted to do, at least start with what it is that I feel like I do best, which is, focus on positive, actionable, practical steps and constructive steps towards self-empowerment, And I realized everybody was going to be afraid of this virus no matter what I had to say out of the gate. It was just going to create a dissonance. Yep. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with what it is we can do to just safeguard our immune function. Because in the end, even when you talk about comorbidities, which is, everybody knows about comorbidities, right? If you have metabolic diseases, if you have pre-existing, COPD or asthma or certain types of autoimmunity, whatever else, oh my gosh, you're going to die from this thing. Or if you're old, you're going to die from this thing. Well, that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is, how functional is your immune system? Yeah. And what can you do to protect, safeguard, and support it during a time when all these things are concerning? Because, the fact of the matter is that people with strong immune function don't die from this. They just don't. And, 99 point, it's an excess of 99%, significant excess of 99% of everybody exposed to this is going to be just fine. It's small numbers of people that are, well, so, the CDC just recently came out and said, of the 180,000 people, how many the number is now, and it's constantly ratcheting up and up and up, that have supposedly died, as a result of this whole thing. Only 6% of that number actually had this as a sole cause of death. The CDC basically said, well, in order to diagnose you, we don't have to actually do a test, which there is not a single test that is reliable. Not one out of all of them. But we don't even need a test. All we need is a suspicion of the condition. And they can base that suspicion on something as mild as a headache or, shortness of breath, which if you're anxious, hello, or, low oxygen levels. Well, if you come in wearing a mask, you're going to have depressed oxygen levels, Yeah. Or you have a sniffle. I mean, we have to realize there are more than 200 respiratory viruses floating about right now, all the time, every single year, that could cause the same symptoms as are attributed to this new so-called novel virus. And the symptoms are almost the same, really. I mean, and so if you walk into a hospital or clinic and you say, well, I think I have a sore throat, or I've had this cough for a few days, or I've got this headache that won't go away. Well, if you're wearing a mask, you probably have a headache, or whatever it is. I know people who under stress went in with shortness of breath and heart palpitations and whatever else, and they were immediately diagnosed with COVID, just right out of the gate, and slapped onto a mechanical ventilator. They were convinced to get slapped onto a mechanical ventilator. Well, it was because in the case of this particular person, who is somebody that I knew, their wife had, gone in with a little respiratory concern. She was immediately diagnosed after trying to recover from cancer treatment. She was just coming out of that. So there was already a PTSD in that family. She gets slapped onto a ventilator right away. He's not allowed to come visit her. He's afraid now. All of a sudden, he thought his wife was going to live. Everything was going to be fine. Now she's dying again. Oh, my God. And then a few days into that, he loses his job. And now he has no way of supporting his family. Even if his wife survives this thing, he has no way of supporting his family. So immediately now he's having, chest pains and shortness of breath. He thinks, I should go in and have this looked at. And as soon as he did, they said, oh, your wife has what? Oh, wow. We need to get you on a ventilator right away. And this was before it was widely known that hospitals were being financially incentivized to diagnose this. Every diagnosis of COVID-19 brought a $13,000 stipend from Medicare. And if they could convince the patient to get on a mechanical ventilator right away, or at any point, they would get another $39,000 for that. And we know now that literally the worst mistake anybody can make is consenting to getting on a ventilator. Almost 100% of the people treated with ventilators in New York ended up dying as a result of ventilator use. And in Elmhurst Hospital, the only person that survived ventilator treatment, which is slap them on this thing that mechanically moves your lungs back and forth, doesn't add oxygen, and does damage to the lungs. And of course, these ventilators are notorious for harboring, antibiotic resistant bacteria that can cause a particularly lethal form of pneumonia. That ventilators, the moment you get on a ventilator, your risk of coming off that ventilator is slim and none. And the one person that made it out alive at Elmhurst was someone who happened to be an opiate addict that had a higher threshold for the sedatives they were trying to use to get him to just sort of, handle the ventilator better, because they're very, very, very uncomfortable. They're forcing your lungs to do something, and you want to breathe differently, if you're awake. Well, this guy, he had a higher threshold for sedating, and he literally ripped the tubes out of his throat. He lived.
Shit.
Others weren't so lucky. So I'm getting off track again. At any rate, but what we know,
isn't it? It's so the
misinformation and untruth compounds on itself, doesn't it? It's just quite staggering. I mean, I totally, I'm on the same page, if you like, with your initial skepticism from what you said about the CIA, back in the 40s. And if we go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve, with the secretive meetings in 1910 and the Federal Reserve Act in 1913,
Absolutely.
this is beyond most people's contextual knowledge, but it's extremely relevant because the documents reveal the secrecy and the deception is openly discoverable, and it's on the record. The strategy of controlled opposition, of all of these things to deceive the public are a matter of fact. They're all on the record, and I think that it's only right and proper that we bring this knowledge to bear as we approach this alleged scary pandemic. And I think, again, with the point you made about the testing and the lack of proven causality between an alleged set of symptoms, which seems to be growing all the time, and any particular microbe, we've got a sort of an association. We haven't got a causal proven relationship. And although I must confess I haven't studied the original papers coming out of China myself, I've listened to the work of Dr. Andrew Kaufman and Dr. Cowan from San Francisco, who I've spoken to, and there's very good reason to not believe an assertion that can't be backed up with a proven factual causal link. I mean, for me, that's right at the beginning of the chain of reasoning, and there's a gap there, and I can't run with it unless the dots are joined there. So. Yeah, I mean, it's a big mess, isn't it?
It is a big mess. And many of the world's top flight infectious disease specialist scientists, many have spoken out saying, this is madness. This is collective suicide. This is ridiculous that the numbers here are not adding up. There's too much that's not adding up. We need to be questioning this narrative. And, we need to be, we need to be not locking down and doing all of these measures, which actually don't even really have a scientific basis to them. Mask wearing, and believe it or not, there's not even any science to support social distancing. There's some that believe that, because that sounds really logical and whatever else. Are you familiar with Dr. Zoe Harcombe?
No, I'm not. No.
Oh my gosh. Well, she's in the UK. You ought to look her up.
I will.
She did an extensive study, an evaluation of the research papers and all of the studies concerning the effectiveness of social distancing. She's done a lot of work around all of this. And she said there's literally nothing in the literature to support it as a measure. Yeah. And yet these are now the gold standards of, preventative care. That we're not even allowed to question. And if, God forbid, you try to show up and there are places too where government officials are being allowed to be exempt from mask wearing, right? And yet everybody else is supposed to have them on. And you would think that if the government officials, if this was really the scary thing that it's being made out to be, and if mask wearing worked, those government officials would be the first to preserve their own behinds.
Of course.
But so the rest of us are really not being given a choice. And we all have a choice. Actually, that's the illusion that we don't have a choice. We all do.
Here in the UK, we were told initially, I imagine it was the same in the States, it was all about flattening the curve. Social distancing, lockdown, all of these measures that have now morphed into a general prevention of disease spread strategy. That's what we got now, is that in order to spread disease, allegedly, we need to socially distance, we need to wear masks. That was never the narrative at the beginning. It's as though they knew, and they did know, that if they just cited the fact that we mustn't overload the National Health Service because there's going to be so many cases, we mustn't overload it. And that was the only reason we were told we all had to stay at home and socially distance. And now that has morphed into a general strategy for disease prevention. Well, as you said, where's the evidence?
Right. Well, in fact, in your country, in the UK, relatively early on, I think it was sometime in February or March, They actually published something on an official government website saying it's been downgraded to something that's not of major concern. And yet, and I have that document. I'm sure it's since been pulled off the web, although I don't know, it'd be interesting to go and look and see if it's still there, but I've got the
Yes,
screenshot of it.
you mean the UK government downgrading? I think it's just after lockdown where they downgraded it from a high consequence infectious disease, I think, an HCID or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a little bit odd, isn't it? I mean, the contradictions just stack up. There's a huge pile of contradictions. And
well, you can't go to the beach. You can't take a walk in the park. You can't go to church, but you can go to Walmart. You can go to the liquor store. You can go to Home Depot, or, I don't know if you have the same stores. But, I mean, where is the collective dissonance? Where is the questioning of the insanity of things that just don't make sense, that don't add up?
We don't see it over here, Nora. I must confess, what I find most alarming about the current situation, when I go out and about, and we're supposed to wear masks in shops here, I refuse to wear a mask because I don't want a headache and I don't want to rebreathe my own.
Right.
When you go out and about, you see people driving in their car with a mask on. You see everybody wearing masks, and it looks like we're in some sort of
people that have crashed their cars, because brains were oxygen deprived and they couldn't think behind the wheel. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we're living in some sort of zombie apocalypse where everyone's had a frontal lobotomy and nobody can see, nobody's thinking, and I find that the most frightening thing about this whole.
It is frightening, but your term is exactly right, because it has been a collective frontal lobotomy. People aren't thinking. They're not capable of thinking. They're too fearful to think. There's another aspect to this too that I've kind of noticed, and that is that it's the younger generation that seems to be most swept up in the hysteria. I mean, a lot of older people are frightened too, because it's, the elderly are supposed to be a major target of this whole thing. But it's sort of interesting that, we baby boomers, those of us born between, was it like 1948 and 1964 or thereabouts, which I think is sort of the baby boomer era, we actually remember what it is to live in a society, in a free and open society. We were around before 9/11. We remember what things were like prior to 9/11, prior to the so-called Patriot Act and whatever it is you had over there in the UK that restricted your freedoms. But there's a whole new generation of young people, millennials and younger people still, that have no such recollection. We have a history of remembering that we need, we lived through the 60s. We understand that governments lie, that, and that we need to be more vigilant. And we remember what it was to stand up for our rights and peacefully protest, injustices and things like that, instead of just rioting, which is what we have here in Portland right now. I'm sure you've heard about all that.
Yeah.
That's almost a whole other show. I have been to downtown Portland and seen what's going on down there. Anyway, whole other story. But we remember. And we remember the lies that started the Vietnam War. We remember the start of the Iraq War and, all of the things that happened to us following 9/11 that were in total dissonance to what we understood our rights and freedoms, to be.
Yeah.
And
I think when you add in also the dumbing down of education, the poor quality of education.
Well, that's the other part of it.
It's every child left
behind, I call it. The lack of civics, class training, especially here in the U.S., where nobody understands the basis of our government at all anymore. The Constitution, Bill of Rights. Nobody really understands what those things are and what they're supposed to be. But yeah, you have I call it every child left behind, and also, rotten to the Common Core. Which in effect, the erosion, really the erosion of education started with John D. Rockefeller and his whole setup of the modern day educational system, which was a factory model of education. And he was famously quoted as saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. And so, It was all about kind of teaching us to accept authority of, the instructors and what we're told, etc. But, obviously education has taken a major nosedive in recent years. And what it consists of now is rote memorization of certain facts that no one is allowed to question.
Yeah.
And the complete, obliteration of anything that teaches critical thinking, any kind of out of the box kind of way of looking at anything, creative thinking, has been completely wiped off of the educational landscape. So there are certain facts that are taught, and those standards are pretty low. But education is basically predicated on, we will teach you what the reality is about history, if we teach it at all, and about the world, and then you get to regurgitate that and feel like you know something.
Sure.
And wow, so critical thinking, critical thought, questioning the narrative is, it's typically punishable.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a young woman, a very, very smart young woman in her high school class down in Florida. She lives down in Fort Lauderdale. I'm friends with her mom. She had done quite a lot of research into vaccine safety issues. We all know they exist. The United States Supreme Court stated unequivocally back in 1986 that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. So we know they're unsafe. They've paid out more than $4 billion with a compensation program for families that had the presence of mind to actually take their injuries to court and get compensation. Of course, it's the taxpayers that are paying that compensation and not the vaccine manufacturers. But I digress. So this young woman decided to do a presentation in her class. And this is somebody who doesn't do anything at even an A- level. This is a kid really smart. She did her homework, she did the presentation, and for her effort, she was given an F.
Shocking.
An F, because
she was off topic.
She was off topic. That was an irresponsible presentation. Really, we're not allowed to question. If vaccines are so safe and effective, well, why can't we talk about this? I mean, really,
it's interesting
why can't it be debated?
Yeah, it's interesting that the anti-vaxxer label, and indeed anyone challenging vaccination over the last few years, I'd say maybe the last decade, 2 decades perhaps, those challenging the vaccine idea, the vaccine agenda, Dr. Andrew Wakefield and others, or him and since, should we say, really coming under heavy censorship and sort of shouted down. And it seems to all have been a prelude for this, because now, we have, the narrative quickly moves on from any questioning of what's going on and how best to deal with it to when will the vaccine be ready? That's all we hear in the UK news here. It's all about when will the vaccine and the new normal, of course, returning when everyone's been vaccinated. And in the context of what you just say, and what people should rightly do in some research before they get their flu shot or get their children vaccinated, in the light of this, in the light of the legislative protection so that vaccine manufacturers are not liable. I mean, this is shocking. This should really ring bells. But again, most people over here, Nora, I don't know about where you are, but most people that even in my sort of satellite friends still vaccinate their children. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I struggle to get my head around it.
Well, it's hard for, to be fair to the parents that are doing this, they're not being given access to anything other than that mainstream narrative, right?
True.
Because everything has been so censored. And so, although I will say I did come across an article, and I don't have it, right in front of me, unfortunately, but where there is a significant percentage of the UK public that is strongly questioning the upcoming vaccines, and rightfully so. So people are, maybe one of the unintended consequences of the lockdown, where I think the powers that be just sort of assumed people were going to be sitting at home and, and having nothing better to do but watch, the constant brainwashing thread of the mainstream news. And then, and then for entertainment in the evening, let's watch Outbreak, or, the pandemic documentary series, which came out conveniently in January. How very convenient.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, they must have been psychic. So anyway, but I think what's happening is that people with time on their hands have been doing some of their own little citizen investigative journalism, have been questioning things, have been doing some digging beyond the mainstream narrative, because really you have to be brain dead. I mean, you have to have the IQ of a wet dish rag not to question some of this. There's so much dissonance to be found, so much that doesn't add up, that anybody with even two reasonably healthy neurons holding hands should know to go and just do a little bit of homework on this.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to understand that when it comes to fact checking, and it's important to point this out too right out of the gate. And there's some very, very, very good articles. Even the Columbia Journalism Review just did an expose on how Bill Gates is funding most of the so-called fact-checking sites, PolitiFact and Pointer and all, Snopes and all of these things that people go to in order to try to get the correct, is this believable or not? You have to understand that none of these fact-checking sites are independent. None of them. No. They all have funding from vested interests. So when you go to those sites, including Wikipedia, you are getting something that has a vested interest behind it. And so, and it's an unfortunate thing that we literally have to, we don't have those convenient fact-checking sites to rely upon to question the narrative. We really kind of have to do our own homework.
Absolutely.
Or we have to find the sources that truly are independent and are providing, research and investigative journalism to back up what they're writing about. Mercola's doing some good work in this now, finally. I mean, I think initially he was sort of swept up in the COVID hysteria, and I was concerned that he was, also that, we have to be, well, I shouldn't have named names, but I think that there are a lot of health websites, particularly where they're selling supplements and things like that may have a vested interest in jumping on the fear bandwagon, because they can also profit from that by selling immune-enhancing supplements. And I'm not saying that supplements can't be tremendously helpful, and they absolutely can. And I've done a lot of that work, and my report contains a lot of that information as it relates specifically to coronavirus-type infections and things like that. And those things are valid. So I don't mean to invalidate them. But now,
there does seem to be, the tide is sort of turning. I agree that there have been some commentators and outspoken, very knowledgeable people, as you say, who I was surprised weren't being more outspoken sooner as well. But it seems that the tide is turning here in the UK to some degree. I'm heartened with what you said a moment ago about a rising tide of resistance here in the UK, although it's outside my immediate circle. I was at a London protest just a couple of weeks ago. And,
you were there? Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I thought I saw you in the crowd. Yeah.
it wasn't massive, but it's a lot more than the couple of hundred people that were at Hyde Park Corner back in April. So things are moving, and I think people maybe back then hadn't quite suffered enough. And it sounds kind of obscene to say that, but I think there does need to be a certain incubation period where people, those few thinking people do sort of join the dots, and they do start thinking implications. Where's this going? And people start realizing, hang on, I don't know anyone who's died apart from very aged parents, perhaps comorbidity situations, people that were otherwise very sick. And when you add in all the evidence that suggests that locking people down, isolating them in solitary confinement virtually in some cases, no fresh air and all of this sort of thing, the morbidities, the death factor, the excess deaths are so easily pointable to the idea of a lockdown anyway.
It's the treatment, not the cause, not the virus.
Yeah.
That has been responsible for the majority of deaths. Here's the thing to consider, too, is that this is the first time ever in all of human history, in all the history of all the pandemics ever, where healthy people have been quarantined, where they've taken ostensibly healthy individuals, and locked them down and forbidden them from leaving their homes. This makes no sense in the context of this sort of thing. The thing to understand about us is that as a species now, we've survived to this point, after a couple million years of evolution, only because we have this genius immune system. We've been exposed to millions of viruses and microbes of all different kinds and all kinds of things over the millennia that could have wiped us out, but didn't, because our immune system is designed to handle that. And what's really important to point out, and this is one of the things that I cover in my report, is the fact that the human immune system doesn't get stronger by being hermetically sealed in a bubble, wearing a hazmat suit and a mask and goggles and shields and gloves and whatever else, and cowering under the bed. Our immune system is designed to function through exposure and through the challenge that if you want to get if you want to get a strong arm, if you have trouble lifting heavy things, right, you don't get stronger by saying, well, I can't lift heavy things, therefore I'm just not going to use my arms. You take weights and you challenge your body to resist against that which may be challenging it, and that's how we get stronger, by challenging ourselves. And it's really the only way we get through this, because the way they treated the 2-week lockdown is like almost there was a noxious, toxic gas in the air, and we all hide behind closed doors and pretend that this gas is going to dissipate and go away, and then we can all come out 2 weeks from now and it's all going to be fine. Whatever this novel virus is, if it's anything, and it's a hall of mirrors, really, when it comes to evaluating what SARS-CoV-2 actually is or isn't. I'm not saying that there isn't a virus. I'm saying that, boy, there's more confusion than not about that. But in the end, whatever this thing is or isn't, along with everything else we get exposed to every year, it's not going away. And it will not go away simply because we hide ourselves for periods of time. When you talk about flattening a curve, what do? You stretch it out. You prolong the inevitable. And we have taken so much longer to arrive at herd immunity, which, by the way, it appears we've arrived at. Because even though there is artificial inflating of numbers, massive overinflation of numbers through bogus testing, and I can certainly go into all of that, and bogus diagnosis based on presentation or presumption or whatever else, and financial incentivization, and God knows what else, we still have a situation where they talk about cases going up. Well, they're not cases. You have positive tests, which are questionable. Okay. Yeah. And you're going to, and they're notorious for false positives. Yeah. But what you have, conversely, is a death rate that's plummeting. Yes. Because if there is a virus, well, we've adapted and we have herd immunity already. Yes. It's there. Sweden had it a long time ago already. And, much ado has been made about the deaths that did occur in Sweden, but more than half of those deaths actually occurred in elder care facilities where, excessive numbers of people were concentrated. And the health minister there said, boy, I really screwed up. I shouldn't have done it, which was kind of refreshing, actually. They don't usually admit to fault. No. But, their society, didn't have to go back to normal. It never left normal. No. They just went about their business. Now,
we have a case-demic here in the UK. There's a lot of hype and talk of the number of cases going up. As you say, this is simply due to the increased amount of testing. And on the BBC News this morning, as we record this on the 10th of September, they're talking about increasing the testing up to 2 million people a day or something crazy. I can't remember the
right, because the more testing, the more positives, and the more positives, the more justification
the more cases.
For the complete erosion of human rights.
Absolutely. No deaths,
and complete control of the entire population. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy reality. Yeah. Something else that I want to alert your viewers to is and listeners is the debate, and you may already know about this, between Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's, and you can find the debate at childrenshealthdefense.org, but you can also probably find it if you just go to bitshoot.com, which is a non-censored media platform that's housing a lot of things that have been booted off of YouTube. I mean, there are a lot of these different media platforms now,
Yeah.
and Reel and Brightian, and there are a number of them.
I have a BitChute channel. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. But you could probably find it there. And it was the debate between Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Alan Dershowitz on the subject of vaccines and on the constitutionality of, I'm basically discussing, because Dershowitz was trying to claim that, no, we have a right to force vaccination of this new vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert F. Kennedy, who is a class act from the navel out in all directions, we are so fortunate to have him, because he does such credible and extraordinary work in these arenas, and he documents absolutely everything. And he speaks with such eloquence and such power. But he took on Alan Dershowitz, and Dershowitz never had a chance. And it is such a profoundly good debate. It was so well, well argued, that everybody needs to watch this, because it raises the concerns about, the coming vaccine and all of that.
Yeah.
And the safety of vaccines in general. And
maybe you can expand, Nora, a little bit, because I know you know something about this RNA vaccine that's coming. You alluded to it in your COVID report that I shall put a link to beneath the video, etc.
I'll give them a link to my primalbody-primalmind.com website, or primalcourses.com, either one.
Yeah.
And you can go and you put in your email, which I'll never abuse, and you will be sent a link that will take you to that page. And when you get to that page, you'll have that report, and it's massively useful. I've been thanked by thousands of people for that report. But also you will have access to a lot of other material that will allow you to, do your own investigations and take this a little bit further in more depth, where I've taken, some of that initial guesswork out of, where do I go to find out more that, that I can trust. I've carefully vetted the sources that I've supplied. Mm-hmm. And, you don't have to take my word for it. You can take those things and do your own digging. But anyway, so that's all there. And if you go to primalbody-primalmind.com or primalcourses.com, where you can, get access to more educational materials, you will eventually get, you will shortly get a link, sent to you where you can access this report. And it's, it's life-saving information. And again, I took a very positive tone. It's not, conspiracy theory land or anything like that. It is a very positive, constructive, actionable, and self-empowering tone that I took in that report to tell you, these are the things that might help. These are the things that are not likely to help. And here's the research to back that up. And here are the kinds of foods you should be thinking about. These are the kinds of supplements you should be thinking about. And this is, certainly I talked about, research surrounding viral infections and how an effective state of ketogenic adaptation is, creates a very, very, hostile environment for viruses. They just don't do well in a person that is effectively adapted to the utilization of fat as a primary source of fuel as opposed to sugar. So, I definitely, talked about that. But getting to what you're asking about the mRNA in a coronavirus vaccine, we've had there are many different coronaviruses, and that's an important point because, for instance, the antibody tests and even the RT-PCR tests are utilizing nucleic acid sequences and utilizing antibodies that relate to the general family of coronaviruses and not SARS-CoV-2 specifically. So if you've had a seasonal cold, just a common cold, which is coronavirus based illness, you may test positive for these things, right? And you can, the problem with the positive tests, of course, is that now, what an antibody test should tell you if you test positive is that, well, you got, especially if you're not symptomatic, well, you got exposed, as we all have been by now, and your immune system mounted a response, and you're fine. But that's not how this is being handled. What it does is it marks you as a carrier. It's almost like HIV. Oh no, you have this thing now and you've got it. And as long as you test positive for it, you are a dangerous person. And you have to be, tracked through contact tracing, which is closest thing to 1984 Big Brother that I can think of. It's the most terrifying thing in the world. It sounds so benign, contact tracing. We should all be terrified of contact tracing. There's nothing good that can come of that. Nothing good. And it doesn't just mark you. This is an important point. It marks everyone that you come into contact with, everyone you love, your family, your children, your spouse, your best friends, anybody that you have come into direct contact with is now also marked and may likely be presumed to also be a carrier, subject to the same draconian restrictions and worse.
Yeah.
And there are places now in the world and even here in the United States where people that have tested positive, even if they're not symptomatic, can be removed forcibly from their homes and in the dark of night even, and dragged to a quarantine facility to be isolated for, undetermined periods of time. This is Nazi Germany stuff. This is not what a democratic society does to its citizens. And there's no basis for the hysteria any longer. There's no emergency anymore. No. There's no emergency. Death rates have been dropping for more than 20 weeks. And the so-called case-demic, it's not even cases. Traditionally in medicine, a case is where a person is infected, right?
We're showing symptoms at least, surely.
Right, they're showing symptoms, right? They're infected with symptoms.
They're ill.
That's not what we're getting as the case-demic. The case-demic is just people that have been deemed presumed to have these things. So anyway, coronaviruses have been around for a long time. There are many different coronaviruses out there. And of course, you would think with the annual, cold season, whatever, that they would have come up with a cold vaccine a long time ago. And especially after SARS-1 and MERS, well, they've tried many times to do this, and they've spent decades trying to do this.
Yeah.
And they've never been able to successfully do it for a couple of different reasons. The most concerning of which is the fact that every time that they have created an RNA coronavirus vaccine, with the subsequent testing in animals, they basically arrived at 100% mortality of the animals, liver failure, irreversible lung damage, things like that happened as a result. And there's also a phenomenon known as vaccine enhancement that seems to occur where the initial antibody response appears to be robust, but there are different kinds of antibodies. And the particular kinds of antibodies that are generated through the vaccines actually make the person more vulnerable to the wild virus when it comes around again. So what happened with the animal models, the ferrets and cats and different things that were initially inoculated and then shown to, they were initially really excited, like, ooh, look at this really robust antibody response. When the same animals got exposed to the wild virus, they all died. And many of them suffered, effects just simply as a result of severe hepatic damage, severe pulmonary damage as a result of the vaccine itself. Now, we had one human trial of this Moderna vaccine, which actually may not make it to market. It's because of all sorts of patent violations, it turns out. And it's interesting that the patent for the coronavirus Moderna vaccine was actually filed for 9 months ago, long before the pandemic. And the evidence is there. And actually, if you go to isc.media, you can, .com or .org, I forget which, you can see where that evidence and paper trail is. Document. Yeah, it's highly suspicious because they were looking for all of this, and in fact, some of the contact tracing, the so-called Trace Act that we have in the United States, which is talking about is $100 billion, $200 billion that's supposed to be allocated for contact tracing, was conceived of close to a year ago in in Africa, with a meeting between the Gates Foundation and a United States congressman from Illinois, where they agreed to put this Trace Act together, sort of like the Patriot Act. A couple days after the attacks on the World Trade Center, we have something the size of, the New York phone book that is just all ready to go. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just saying, you have to be a little naive to not at least rationally question, the logic behind how rapidly all of this has fallen into place from every imaginable angle. So how soon they were just absolutely certain about everything they were saying, and how soon they were just automatically dismissing some of the world's top scientists, immunologists, infectious disease specialists. Dr. John Ioannidis, who is an infectious disease specialist and professor at Stanford University. Very credible, hardly what you'd call a fringe voice. Yeah. Has stepped rather courageously forward and said, look, this is crazy. He said, given the numbers, given the actual data surrounding this whole thing, had this virus snuck into the environment and into our population unnoticed, as a lot of them do one year to the next, and nobody had ever blown the whistle and slapped a label on it and called it a pandemic and whatever else, had it just slipped into the population unnoticed, we would not have had any statistically different mortality rate for this year's influenza season. Yeah. It would not have been statistically alarming at all. It would have been well within the parameters, maybe on the high side of normal, of any other given year. And there is a point I want to make about influenza too, because much ado is being made about, this is just like a bad influenza. Well, influenza tends to be, talked about by the same flawed standards. On any given year where they talk about flu season, again, there are more than 200 different respiratory viruses out there. But during influenza season, it's all one thing, right? Right? It's all one thing. And it's really rare, actually, in any given, no matter how bad the influenza season is, it's extremely rare for people that go in for medical care during that time for anybody to do any kind of test to actually speciate what type of virus is actually affecting. They just sort of say, it must be the flu or a cold or whatever. They'll just call it the flu if it's bad enough. But they don't know. And so the actual number of confirmed cases of actual, influenza are minute, not more than like 100 or 200 or something like that a year. But they say, 60,000 people died of this. They don't know because, they will hype whatever it is that they're trying to sell a vaccine for. And of course, the flu vaccine is highly profitable. So every year it's the flu. Yeah. And the other thing, one of the things I asked myself with this, because of course what seemed to be killing people was this, particularly lethal form of, or advanced pneumonia, right? And I'm thinking, how many people get pneumonia every year? As a matter of course. Well, in the United States, which is all I really looked at, it's more than 2 million people just in the U.S. alone that get pneumonia every single year. And of those 2 million people or more, 55,000 people, as a matter of course, will die. And those that die, it's typically the same suspects, people with comorbidities, people who have otherwise weakened immune systems, the frail, the elderly, all that kind of a thing. Yeah. It's the same story. But the thing to point out about pneumonia is that it's not just a viral illness. Pneumonia has any number of causes. It can be viral, can be bacterial, can be fungal, can be caused by certain medications, can be caused through aspiration, even through stress. There's even something called stress-based pneumonia. And, but, this year it's all one thing. And during influenza, it's all one thing.
It's very tight, isn't it?
Yeah, right. And so, I think what we're doing is we're just sort of conflating the same thing. And we're calling it something else because it's convenient to do so. Because honestly, the death rates from respiratory illness this year are not appreciably different than any other year. If you're looking at COVID deaths as excess deaths, you're not counting right at all. So
I remember looking at this at a graph showing the I think it was for the year 2017 mortality causes, top mortality causes, and you can look across the board and see sort of cancer and road accidents was about 3 million globally per year, and pneumonia, respiratory diseases were all sort of bundled up together, and it was around about 6 or 7 million, I believe.
Yes.
I'll put a link in there for the particular website. But again, it all points to this contextual picture, which is so essential to an accurate understanding of whatever's going on in any situation, to zoom out and see the bigger context and see how many people a year die of what, and then you start to get a picture and you think, well, actually, there's a whole lot of nothing really happening. And that's not to say that people aren't dying, and obviously it's a great shame that people die.
One death is too many, right?
Yeah,
right.
But people die all the time. I mean, we have to also acknowledge that people are always dying. We're always being born and always dying.
7,000 people every day die of something. And mostly of totally preventable metabolic diseases, by the way, not infectious diseases, right?
Absolutely.
So the vast majority of people are dying of totally preventable metabolic diseases. Number 3 cause of death is actually, is medical caused error. But, who's counting? 400,000 people a year. They're not restricting, more than 126,000 or so people every year die from properly prescribed medications, right? From complications due to so-called properly prescribed medications. But nobody's restricting access to medications, which all of which come with risks, all of which come with side effects, all of which are potentially harmful or lethal. But, here's this thing. And really, if the authorities truly had our best interests at heart, if this was all for our own good, because we want to keep you safe, we want to keep you protected and healthy and whatever else, well, they're certainly not taking the collateral damage from this into account. Because what we are experiencing by orders of magnitude in excess of anything being caused by this virus is we're experiencing now deaths of increasingly of poverty, deaths of people are starving to death, people are being people are being locked into homes with their abusers, dying and suffering all kinds of trauma from domestic violence. Child abuse has gone through the roof. You have diseases of people dying of stress-related illnesses at exponential rates and are being denied treatment of other conditions that are deemed to be less essential than this virus, and therefore, they're being shut out of those treatments. And then you have the radical increases in drug and alcohol abuse, and while we're at it, mass suicides across the planet. None of that collateral damage is concerning the mainstream media at all, it seems, concerning our authorities at all. It's all about this one thing. And the complete and total destruction of tens of millions of lives based on an erroneous model that, I'm sorry, came out of your country, Neil Ferguson, who's never gotten anything right, and who has heavily funded, of course, by Bill Gates and whatever else, has kind of gone, oops, my bad, wrong numbers.
Yeah.
And this whole thing has been predicated on those wrong numbers, and those have since been shown to be completely wrong by 20 times. And yet things are only getting more restrictive and more draconian. What the hell?
Yeah.
What's it going to take for people? I mean, I have so many friends in Australia. I've spent a lot of time in Australia. So many people that are like family to me over there. And I'm watching what's happening in Melbourne, as we should all be doing, with complete and total horror.
Yeah, it seems incredibly draconian down there.
Yeah.
Sorry to speak over you there, Nora, but it does seem incredibly draconian what's happening in Melbourne, doesn't it?
It's we're all basically on a global scale now. We're all living in communist China. This is what it boils down to. Yeah. And not in a good way, No. And we're not talking dim sum here, We're talking about absolute totalitarian fascism, supposedly for our own good. One of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, once famously said that anyone who is willing to is willing to surrender their liberty for a sense of safety will deserve and receive neither liberty nor safety.
Yeah.
And he also said that security without liberty is prison.
Yeah.
And this is effectively what we have here on a mass scale. And I'm wondering what it's going to take for people that have had every human right taken away from them and are being told they will have no choice but to subject themselves to literally surrender their very physical sovereignty to this whole debacle without any scientific proof of anything, with just the say-so of, I mean, since when do we trust our government to tell us the truth about anything? I mean, on a good day, most people mistrust the government, and yes, and rightfully so, because we know that corporate interests have long since corrupted anything that was well-intentioned there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every government official is necessarily to blame, but the ones that are complicit in this, you know, they need to be held accountable to what is happening, because many more lives are being destroyed than saved right now.
Absolutely.
And you know, anyone that's not questioning this, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. You know, I can't even respect that. You know,
No.
there's just no room for just unquestioning obedience at this point.
No.
So,
and this is one of the reasons why I liked your report, Nora, because you outline these things that you can do, and I think for the thinking people that are probably the majority of the audience here, there are positive things that you can do, and this report of yours lists them, you know, and they're all within our power. I mean, I'm sure you'd agree, diet is probably our most powerful tool, arguably our most powerful health tool, and it's completely within our power of choice still.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, so the number one thing, you know, probably the single most important thing that anyone can do for their health and well-being right now, you know, before they do anything else, doesn't cost you a damn penny, doesn't force you to change your diet. In fact, it is to turn off the damn news. You know, turn off the mainstream news completely and avoid all the mainstream sanctioned online information, because there is ample reason to question the veracity of that information, and it's all far more likely to hurt than help you. You know, there was an article published in The Guardian, you know, and I actually want to go through some of it, if that's okay. Do we have time?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, excellent. It's this wonderful article that was published in The Guardian, and I'm not sure of the date, but I have it in the report, and I believe I might, hopefully I provide a link. Hopefully you can look it up. I know I have the link somewhere.
Absolutely. I have the report, so I have the link.
Good. But so basically, the article concludes, just in short, in a nutshell, news is bad for your health. It leads to fear and aggression, and it hinders your creativity and ability to think deeply. The solution? Stop consuming it altogether. And this is based on a whole bunch of research that was done on people who spend a lot of time engaged in mainstream media. So this article basically showed how, and I'm going to go through this in bullet points, and these bullet points are available in my article. The mainstream news misleads and overrides rational thinking. As a matter of course, that's what it does. The mainstream news is irrelevant to anything that has the potential to improve the quality of your life. News has no true explanatory power, right? It comes at you in sound bites, right? Mm-hmm. It's literally toxic to your body and brain. In other words, it constantly triggers your limbic system and your cortisol levels, right? That then dysregulates your immune system and ravages your brain. You get excess cortisol, your immune function literally drops down to nothing. You're immediately vulnerable. In other words, your body finds itself in a state of chronic stress, and you have high stress hormone levels that leads to impaired digestion, a lack of cellular growth and healing. It leads to nervousness and susceptibility to infections. It also leads to brain shrinkage. How convenient, right? Which is probably owing to why everybody's going along with this. The other potential side effects include anxiety, depression, aggression, tunnel vision, and desensitization. Also, watching the news regularly has been shown to increase cognitive errors and feeds the mother of all cognitive errors, which is corporate and political confirmation bias, right? Not to mention social polarization. Divide and conquer. It's the ultimate divide and conquer
Yeah.
tool. News also inhibits thinking. Thinking requires concentration. Concentration requires uninterrupted time. News pieces are specifically engineered to interrupt you. They are like viruses that steal attention for their own purposes. News makes us shallow thinkers, but it's worse than that. News severely affects our memory function. According to at least one Canadian study, news is an intentional interruption system. Also, news works like a drug, literally altering the structure of your brain. The more news we consume, the more we exercise the neural circuits that are devoted to skimming and multitasking while ignoring those used for reading deeply and thinking deeply with any meaningful focus. News wastes our time. News makes us passive. Isn't that nice? News stories are overwhelmingly about things that you cannot influence. It grinds us down until we adopt a worldview that is pessimistic, desensitized, sarcastic, cynical, and fatalistic. The scientific term is learned helplessness,
Yeah,
right?
that's the one.
Which is also associated with clinical depression, which is another major, that's an even bigger pandemic of our time than this virus.
Yeah.
News also kills creativity. We need independent reporting that polices our institutions and uncovers actual truth. That's what journalism is supposed to do. Otherwise, it's just PR, right? We don't need something that just gives us sound bites and corporate vested interest-driven talking points. And that's why we have to support quality alternative media. And this is also why alternative media is in the crosshairs of the mainstream media right now and is being called fake news. Mainstream news is the fake news. Absolutely the fake news.
Yeah.
So, that's the first and most important thing that we can do, honestly. Yes, absolutely. I talk about a lot of other things. But so from the standpoint of our health, adopting a fat-based metabolism has been shown actually to be powerfully protective against influenza-like illness, which this falls in that category. And viruses don't do very well in an environment that is geared toward the utilization of fat and ketones as a primary source of fuel as opposed to glucose. And we know that blood sugar surges are going to automatically lead to, roughly a 90% crash in your leukocytic index for up to several hours following a high glycemic meal. So, if you can avoid the things that jack up your blood sugar, your immune system is way further ahead. And if you're relying on fat as a primary source of fuel, that by definition automatically avoids these roller coasters of blood sugar spiking and crashing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a really, really important thing.
And so empowering as well, because you can do it. And the other things you mentioned, such as hydration, good sleep, a moderate amount of exercise, keep active, fresh air,
Right.
a lot of these easily.
Sunshine, with something that, of course, the people in Australia, of all places, are being deprived of right now. That there was one study in India that was done, showed that 98% of those that died, that they believe as a result of this viral infection, had vitamin D levels that were below 20 nanograms per deciliter. And those, and only 4% of those that died were at 30 nanograms per deciliter and above.
Gosh, shouldn't you be at least 40
D,
or something?
There's one nutrient. I mean, most people are thinking vitamin C, and absolutely. I'm a fan of liposomal vitamin C because it behaves in the body very close to IV vitamin C, which we know, that the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, has published numerous studies now, and there are quite a few really good studies coming out of China where they were treating people with IV vitamin C and they were recovering left and right. Liposomal vitamin C can act like IV vitamin C, and it's both fat and water soluble. Anything fat soluble is going to be more supportive of your immune function than the water soluble nutrients. Vitamin A, retinol. Prior to World War II, the primary focus of anti-infective therapy was vitamin A, retinol, which only comes from animal source foods. And of course, the superfood in which it's found is liver. So you want the ultimate superfood to get your immune system through this thing. Include, a portion of, serving of liver a couple, 3 times a week, right? Hugely beneficial. And also we know that zinc, which is meant to work in tandem with vitamin A, is really, really important for immune function. We also know from hundreds now of physicians that are working on the front line with people suffering, the more severe effects or any effects really of this, of these respiratory infections that we're seeing right now, that a combination of a non-toxic drug called hydroxychloroquine, which has been around for more than 60 years and is actually way safer than aspirin. It's an over-the-counter thing in many Latin American countries because it's an effective treatment for malaria. And it doesn't really come with any meaningful side effects when you use it in small amounts, which is all that's needed. The combination of hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, is also sometimes called Z-Pak, which is an antibiotic, and zinc results in almost 100% recovery with no hospitalization, no death, no nothing.
What foods might you find zinc in, Nora?
Pardon?
What foods might you find zinc in?
Animal source foods are your best sources of zinc. And I know people of the vegan persuasion are going to say, oh, pumpkin seeds. The problem is that the plant-based sources of zinc are frequently bound up in phytates, things that basically prevent the absorption utilization of zinc. The other thing that's problematic with plant-based sources of zinc is that it, in order to absorb zinc, requires the presence of hydrochloric acid, which is, of course, a problem with people in general right now because under stress, we do a very poor job of producing. Digestion is a parasympathetic process. We need to be calm and relaxed and reasonably centered when we eat in order for the digestive juices to flow, in order for proper digestive process to take place. If you're in a state of fight or flight, that's problematic. And if you're eating a vegan diet, forget it. You're not absorbing the zinc that's in your food. You need hydrochloric acid in order to ionize zinc and make it available, and in order to make a lot of nutrients and a lot of minerals available. So when people are supplementing right now, I tend to recommend Ionic Zinc because hydrochloric acid ionizes zinc, and that's the ionization process is what makes zinc bioavailable. You can buy zinc in an ionized state. And Ionic Zinc then bypasses that concern. If you have digestive impairment, which most people do right now, frankly, that's a way of getting around that. But, you're not going to get your vitamin A by eating a bunch of carrots. It can't happen. Beta carotene is pro-vitamin A. It's not vitamin A. And it can take anywhere from 6 to 20 units of beta carotene to form a single unit of retinol under ideal circumstances, which almost nobody is operating under ideal circumstances right now. And if you're a kid, you can't do it at all. So, you've got to be looking at cod liver oil maybe, but, stay away from so-called fermented cod liver oils, please, please, please. They're horrifically rancid. I've taken a look at the research regarding fermented, cod liver oils, and you don't ferment fat, people. You ferment carbohydrates. Protein putrefies and fat rancidifies. So please stay away from these so-called fermented oils. They're not fermented. They're rancid.
Good point.
Okay. But at any rate, but vitamin D3, obviously, sunshine, yes, but you also have to have ample cholesterol, and that's an animal source food. If you want preformed vitamin D3, that only comes from animal source foods, and the richest natural source would be fully pastured, pork fat. In other words, lard from pigs that have been allowed to be out in fresh air and sunshine, right? That is our actually richest dietary source of D3 in our modern day food supply. But you can also do emulsified forms of D3 in supplements if you want. And I actually think that's a really good idea. Because if you're under stress, you have any kind of inflammatory condition, lots of people have autoimmune diseases and don't know it, you're blowing through your D levels. So D3, but also test periodically to make sure your levels are healthy, and you really want to shoot for right around 60 nanograms per milliliter of vitamin D3, of 25 hydroxy vitamin D, I should say, in order to be, kind of in the sweet spot where your immune function can operate more normally. And then the other thing that tends to get very overlooked is vitamin K2. And I am talking about MK4, which is only found in animal source foods, in pastured animal fats, particularly poultry fat, but also, potentially grass-fed, raw grass-fed dairy and that sort of a thing. There are trade-offs with dairy that I'm not personally willing to make. I mean, there's one company called Pure Indian Foods that makes a cultured ghee in which all of the trace proteins from the product have been removed and verified through independent testing. So that specific product, not cultured ghee in general, but that specific one by Pure Indian Foods is the only dairy product in my life right now. For a lot of reasons. That would be probably another show. But
would it be present in eggs? When you say pastured poultry,
very minute amounts in eggs, some vitamin A, but not so much K2. So, but pastured animal fats in general, you find K2, poultry fat and poultry liver, really rich. And the richest natural supplemental source of K2, the only kind that the human body recognizes in any viable way, the only form of vitamin K2 that you will ever find in the human brain, or that there was a study done with pregnant women, and they found that the most popular supplemental form of K2 right now is an MK7 form. It's derived from bacterial fermentation of soy products, of natto. Yeah. And it actually comes a lot often from genetically modified bacteria, that are artificially manipulated in the lab. And the reason that form of K2 is the darling, there's been a lot of just horribly misleading scientific evidence to show that that's beneficial at all. The only reason it's the darling of the supplement industry right now is that it can be patented. And there's actually no basis for its effectiveness in the human body. And it will not cross the umbilical blood of a pregnant woman into a fetus, which should tell you something. It may accumulate in the placenta and cause abnormalities there. And I know of cases, anecdotally, of cases where there were abnormal births when there were large doses of MK7 being taken during pregnancy. Mm-hmm. That, still has yet to be kind of rooted out. Research. In my view, stick with nature, stick with the way we were designed to consume these things. Yeah. There's a particular strain of, and this is going to sound a little weird, but a particular strain of emu oil that is actually, to date, the richest natural source of K2 found. Here in the States, it's called, Walkabout Health Products. I don't know. I think that Walkabout may be available in Europe and the UK. I'm pretty sure it might be. But in Australia, it goes under the name of Baramol. So at any rate, what's so important about K2 is that for people that are taking vitamin D3 supplements, like they're going out of style, you're setting yourself up for some very serious imbalances unless you add K2 to the mix. We know that K2 is incredibly important for immune function, has many anti-cancer properties, many important anti-infective properties. But most importantly, it is there to balance the effect of D3. With vitamin D3, you will absorb calcium better, but it's vitamin K2 that decides where that calcium is going to go.
Right.
And if it's going to be properly utilized or not. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be deposited into your enamel and into your bones where it belongs? Or in the absence of MK4, is it going to get deposited in your arteries, in your joints, in your brain, right? In your heart? And so many cases now of heart calcification, whatever, are ostensibly K2 deficiencies because we just don't get enough of this. So I'm a big fan of that particular product. I don't have a financial stake in the company or anything, but I am a fan of the really quality, ethical practices of the company and of the research that has been borne out of this particular strain of emu oil. It's kind of a remarkable product. It is a food source, right? Yeah. It is a food source, not an isolated nutrient. Yeah. And if you see K2, MK4 on a vitamin shelf somewhere, understand that is 100% synthetic. There is no natural MK4. And when it comes to fat-soluble nutrients, you don't want synthetic fat-soluble nutrients. You want the real deal from real food. And the fat-soluble nutrients are the ones that are most likely to strongly affect and support your immune function. And the most important fat-soluble nutrients all come, the ones most critical to your immune function, all come from animal source foods.
Right. Well, that's really important.
Right. And they're required, too, for the proper utilization of a lot of minerals that are important for immune function as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, just as just a few things off the top of my head. I mean, the report is 100 pages long, right? And so I've covered this from a lot of angles, and I provide research to show where these things are likely to benefit you. And I'm not selling these supplements, right? That's kind of, I've been told by a lot of people I should have my own supplement line. I don't want that. I don't like selling supplements, the idea of selling supplements, because I don't want to be accused of having conflicts of interest. If I'm going to recommend a particular product, I will typically disclose if I have, an affiliate account with them or something. But rest assured, if I have an affiliate account with anybody, it's only because I've probably approached them and said, I want in on this. This is incredible.
Yeah,
this is a
absolutely.
fantastic product. And I probably don't make enough from affiliate sales to pay an electric bill anyway. So it's not how I make my money. It's really important to me that the information I provide, be accurate and thoroughly vetted. It's not important for me to be right so much as it's important for me to be accurate and responsible in my reporting of this kind of information. I want people to have the best possible information they can so that they can feel self-empowered and not debilitated, by fear.
Yeah, and that's so important. So important in this context that we're in, isn't it? To try and build up some of that self-empowerment, counteract the anxiety and the helplessness that people might be feeling as they get swept along with this narrative. So it's a great contribution to empower people, and this is a fabulous, concise contribution of knowledge. I mean,
I realize some of what we've talked about here is kind of scary. There's a fine line we have to walk here, because I don't want to be fear-mongering, but here's the deal. If you're asleep in bed and you're having dreams of having umbrella drinks on a white sandy beach surrounded by native girls or cabana boys or, whatever, or even if you're sound asleep and it's fitful sleep, nobody likes being woken up out of a dead sleep to be told your house is on fire, right? And, I hate like hell to wake people up from their peaceful slumber when they're comfortable. While I actually don't hate it. It's actually part of what I think is important to do. Nobody likes to be jarred out of a slumber and told that their house is on fire. But we've got to deal with what's going on.
It's a lifesaver.
We have to turn the lights on, and we have to be willing to honestly look at the obstacles we're facing if we're going to know how to navigate around them, and what it is that we need to do as a people group in order to transform this situation in a way that preserves our human rights.
Yeah.
But right now, honestly, nobody's coming to save us, right?
No.
We're the ones we've been waiting for. It's up to us to stand up and say no to things that are descending us into what could very rapidly become a permanent state of totalitarian fascism on a global scale. At least in Nazi Germany, if you were lucky enough to have friends in the underground, you could be, squirreled out of the country and into a safe haven. There are no safe havens anymore.
Absolutely.
I know people trying to run off to, places like Ecuador and whatever, thinking that they're going to find something better there. And I'm sorry. They have 2:00 curfews there, and everybody's supposed to wear masks 24/7 indoors and out. And, if you're caught not wearing a mask in the street, you will be accosted by groups of people that will humiliate you publicly, and then you get ticketed. There's no safe place.
No.
We have to. But here's the good news from all of this. And again, I'll use an example of my own country, that at least where I live now. I was born in Canada, but the United States. It was less than 5% of the early colonists here in the United States that had enough of a problem with imperialist British rule that they were willing to stand up and mount a revolution against that, right? Against King George. Sorry to you as a member of the UK. But guess what? It was enough. It was less than 5, it was like 3% of the population at that time had enough of a problem to do something about it, and it was enough. We don't need everybody to be on board with this, as many as possible, though, because we're operating at the greatest disadvantage in human history, and that is the disadvantage of technocracy. That is the disadvantage of the kinds of technologies that are in place right now that have the capacity to track your every move, surveil everything you do, control every facet of your life, and actually determine, be the arbiters of your freedoms forevermore on every level through the use of simple algorithms, right? So it's going to take more of us, I think, than what it took with the American Revolution, but it doesn't have to take a lot more, and it doesn't take everyone. What it takes is a meaningful tipping point.
Yeah.
And it's happening. We're starting to see this. I mean, there were 1.3 million people on a couple of different occasions showed up in the streets of Berlin. There's a country that's a little touchy when it comes to signs of encroaching fascism.
Yeah.
They recognize what they're seeing, and they want none of it. And they're marching through the streets peacefully in the traditions of brilliant leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, we are this extraordinary species. We are this brilliant, capable species. But we are at our best in community with one another. And we're at our most effective when we come together and we work together focused on what it is we have in common, not what divides us, right? Don't fall for that. You're falling for something that in the end, can result in absolutely nothing positive at all. If we were more focused on those things we share in common, which is the majority. I mean, as human beings, there's far more we have in common than not.
Yes.
If we're focused on our differences, well, then they've got us. And it's all is lost ultimately. Yeah. We need to come together on those things that we share in common as a freedom-loving species that requires. We are a social tribal species. Human touch is as much a nutrient to us as nourishing food, air, water, sunshine. Yeah. Without it, we die, or we lose our minds. What do they do in prison camps where they want to brainwash, or in torture facilities, like Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib and all these places where, they want to really punish or mind control a person. They put them in isolation from other human beings because there's literally no more cruel a fate than that. This is that's happening on a global scale. So we need to come together and we need to say a collective no. Yes. And it needs to be unambiguous and uncompromising, or else, we don't have a lot of time to do this, honestly. The noose is tightening, and things have loosened up a bit, and I think that's a bit illusory. They're talking about a second wave, which is the case-demic, which is nothing at all. And we need to do something before, before things close down so much that
absolutely
not be able to have a second chance.
Yeah, well, Nora, I think you've painted a comprehensive and realistic picture. And yes, some might find it alarming, and it is alarming. And I think we have to have a reality check. We have to acknowledge, if the house is burning down, we have to do something. And it is very important that people realize the gravity of the situation. But at the same time, I think, you've illustrated things that we can do as well. There's a lot we can do to safeguard our own health, so we can avoid that anxiety. And I will provide links to all of your websites where that report can be obtained, and all of the other information you've alluded to, which has been fantastic. And I'm most grateful for you sharing your picture with us.
The one last thing I want to point out is that I have an online program. Yes, I'm selling it. I mean, the report totally free of charge. The information surrounding current events I consider too important to charge for, and that's free for everybody. Hundreds of hours of my time free for you. But I have a program called the Primogenic Plan, a 3-week meal-by-meal total health transformation program, and it handholds anyone, availing themselves of that program through the process, the step-by-step process of adopting the sort of fat-based metabolism, ancestrally based fat-based metabolism way of eating. And that has been demonstrated in research to be so profoundly immune enhancing. And the thing is, it's not about weight loss per se, although that'll probably be a lot of people's favorite side effect. But I also allow for people that may need to gain weight, or people that, I allow for a lot of different situations that can be adapted, for this. But it's all about health optimization, right? That is the crux of this, and that's what differentiates it from every other little keto program out there or every paleo program out there. This really takes things to a meticulous degree to optimize the best available principles in health science and medicine for your optimal well-being. And so the Primogenic Plan is kind of the program to help anybody and everybody, adapt to this health optimizing way of eating that takes these immune factors and different things into account. And it is, and I'm prepared to make that available to your viewers, listeners, at a 30% discount. And I'll get you that information. I'll get you that coupon code.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I think the coupon code I'm sending you is going to be well, I'll send it to you. It to you. So I think it's Matrix 2020, but I'm not sure. So anyway,
fabulous.
There you go.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nora. Really appreciate all of this information and all of the other links and things that you've alluded to and pointed us to. I'll have all the links summarized. And wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And it's just marvelous to hear that there are definite things that we can do in the midst of a very, very serious. So thank you so much.
You have more control than not. You really have more power to overcome this than not on every level. And so hopefully, you'll feel far better after you read that report. You'll realize just how powerful you are and how easy it can be. So, I so appreciate you and what you do, Nigel. You're like a brother from another mother. So
thank you. That's wonderful.
I adore what you do.
Great stuff. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I do hope that you appreciate the value Nora's shared with us today. Please visit the website lawfulrebel.com. All the links will be found there on the blog page associated with the podcast. And I do hope you'll join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.